Ryan Reynolds just made the biggest mistake of this entire Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni saga. And I need you to understand exactly what he did, because the audacity of this move is genuinely breathtaking. He went on a Canadian interview, sat down, got comfortable, and told the world, with a completely straight face, that the problem with society right now is that people on social media do not think critically enough. That people just read headlines and share things without actually thinking. That everyone should stop trusting independent voices and go back to legacy media. Go back to the New York Times. Go back to Time magazine. Trust the big outlets. Let them tell you what is happening. And the internet looked at Ryan Reynolds, a man whose wife allegedly coordinated with the New York Times before filing her legal complaint. A man whose name does not appear once in that same paper's recent coverage of a case he was allegedly deeply involved in. A man whose wife's legal team subpoenaed over 107 independent content creators and demanded their bank records, and said, "Ryan, are you serious right now? Because here is the thing. The New York Times that Ryan Reynolds is telling you to trust?" A federal judge, Judge Lyman himself, referenced evidence in his own court ruling that Blake's team coordinated with that exact outlet before her complaint was even publicly filed. The paper helped build the story. And now that same paper is covering the story without disclosing any of that. And Ryan Reynolds wants you to go back to trusting these people. Welcome back to the Marquee Report. I'm your host. And today we are breaking down one of the most spectacular cell phones in recent celebrity history. Because Ryan Reynolds went on television to talk about critical thinking, and accidentally revealed exactly why people stopped trusting him. Let's get into every single layer of this. Let's set the scene. Ryan Reynolds sat down for a Tom Power interview recently and started going off about media literacy. About how people just read headlines and share things without thinking. About how social media has created a generation of people who do not actually consume information properly. And on the surface, okay. Fair point. Social media literacy genuinely is a problem. Misinformation genuinely exists. Nobody is arguing that. But then Ryan kept going. And it became very clear that what he actually wanted was for everyone to abandon independent voices and return to legacy media. The New York Times, Time magazine. The big established outlets with editorial independence and journalistic integrity. And at that exact moment, anyone who has been following the Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni case for the last year started laughing. Because the legacy media Ryan Reynolds is telling you to trust is the exact same legacy media that his wife's team allegedly used as a personal PR weapon. The New York Times did not just happen to write a critical piece about Justin Baldoni. According to court documents and findings from Judge Lyman himself, Blake's team reportedly coordinated with the New York Times before the complaint was even publicly filed. She gave them the story early. The paper then turned off its paywall so the article could spread as far as possible. Maximum reach. Maximum damage. On purpose. And Ryan Reynolds wants you to trust these people. Unconditionally. Without question. Now let's talk about the most recent New York Times piece, because this is where the holes in legacy media coverage become impossible to ignore. The article, framed around Blake's legal situation and an untested California law, describes the dismissal of Blake's sexual harassment claims as happening due to, and this is their actual phrase, legal technicalities. Legal technicalities. Here is what Judge Lyman actually wrote. He went through each incident Blake's team brought forward, point by point, and found that several of those incidents either would not support a hostile work environment claim at all or would do so only minimally when taken in context. The circumcision comment Blake's team referenced happened before filming even started. The screenplay content that was flagged as inappropriate, Lyman noted it was not surprising in the context of making a film. The comment about looking pretty hot, insufficient according to the judge. Detailed. Thorough. Point by point. And the New York Times reduced all of that careful judicial analysis to 2 words. Legal technicalities. That is not reporting. That is spin. Dressed up in the language of journalism. And then there is what the article left out completely. The Sony texts, where Sony executives described Blake as a terrorist and a bully, not mentioned once. The shell company Blake's team reportedly incorporated in September 2024 specifically to extract Justin's texts through a subpoena before filing her complaint, not mentioned. Ryan Reynolds' alleged involvement, his editorial notes on abuse scenes, his calls to WME allegedly pushing to have Justin fired, his role in press tour dynamics, not mentioned. Not once. The most powerful non-party in this entire situation simply does not exist in the New York Times version of events. And that is not an accident. Now here is the part of this story that should make every single person watching deeply uncomfortable. Because this is where it stops being about celebrity drama and starts being about something much bigger. Blake Lively's legal team subpoenaed 107 content creators. Independent journalists. YouTubers. Podcasters. People who were simply talking about this case online. And they demanded bank records. They wanted private communications. They were essentially trying to find out who was funding critical coverage of Blake and whether there was some coordinated effort against her. 107 people. Bank records. Private messages. From independent creators who were doing nothing more than reading court documents and explaining them to their audiences. And the New York Times article about weaponizing legal systems, the paper that is supposed to be protecting voices from being silenced, mentioned none of this. Not one word about the fact that Blake's own legal team was using legal subpoenas to financially and emotionally overwhelm over 100 independent voices. If that is not weaponizing the legal system, what is? And this is exactly what connects back to Ryan's critical thinking speech. Because the independent creators he dismisses as untrustworthy? They were the ones actually reading Judge Lyman's full ruling. They were the ones going through it page by page. They were the ones pointing out what the New York Times piece left out. The legacy media Ryan wants everyone to return to was the one skipping the details that did not fit the narrative. So who exactly is lacking critical thinking here, Ryan? And then there is the Time magazine situation. Because this connects everything together in a way that is hard to ignore. Blake Lively was recently named one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people. And people immediately started asking questions about the timing. Because this recognition arrived right in the middle of the most publicly damaging period of the entire legal saga. At the exact moment Blake's credibility was being questioned most loudly. When powerful celebrities receive high-profile recognition from major publications during a credibility